Elara Monroe shoved her hair into a messy bun and muttered to herself as she tied the apron around her waist. This is the last time I cover for Ivy's shift. The tiny café on Westbrook Avenue was already buzzing with late-morning customers, and she hadn't even clocked in yet. Ivy, her roommate and best friend, had begged her the night before to take her Friday shift. It's just one customer, same guy, comes in every Friday at noon, tips well, quiet, easy, Ivy had said. Elara had rolled her eyes then. She was doing Ivy a favor, not expecting anything more than a few extra bucks and maybe a slice of leftover banana bread at the end of her shift. She had no idea her life was about to change. Just after 11:50, the bell above the door jingled. Elara glanced up from behind the counter, wiping her hands on her apron. The man who walked in was tall, broad-shouldered, and wore an expensive-looking navy coat that probably cost more than her rent. His dark hair was perfectly styled, his jawline sharp, and the air around him seemed to shift when he walked by like gravity tilted in his direction. He didn't look around. He walked straight to the corner booth like he owned it. Elara blinked. That had to be him. Ivy's quiet, easy customer. Taking a deep breath, she grabbed a notepad and walked over. "Hi," she said, putting on her best smile. "Welcome back. Ivy's out today, so I'll be taking care of you." He looked up from his phone, his gaze settling on her like he was actually seeing someone for the first time in days. His eyes were a dark hazel, intense but not unfriendly. "You're not Ivy." "Nope, Elara, temporarily standing in for your regular server." He gave a short nod. "All right, same order as usual, black coffee, no sugar." "And the spinach feta quasa?" "Coming right up." She turned, but not before catching the way his eyes followed her. By the time she returned with his order, he was watching her again. "Elara," he said, trying out her name like it was a foreign word. "That's me. I'm Cassian Mercer." That name hit her like a jolt. Mercer, as in Mercer Enterprises, as in the tech company that had just bought out half the skyline in Midtown. He didn't seem like the flashy type, but he definitely radiated money. Even his watch, silver, sleek, probably worth thousands, was understated but screamed luxury. "You own Mercer Enterprises?" she asked, setting down the coffee. He raised a brow. "You know the company?" "Only because their logo is on every building near my bus stop," Cassian chuckled. "Yeah. That's me." "Wow, so you're a millionaire," she said before she could stop herself. He tilted his head. "Is that a bad thing?" "No," she said quickly, cheeks warming. "I just didn't expect someone like you to hang out in a place like this." "That's exactly why I like it." They said nothing for a moment. Then Elara realized she was still standing there, gawking. "Right," she said, stepping back. "I'll let you eat." But as she turned, Cassian said, "Do you always fill in for Ivy?" "No, just today. She owed me." "Then I'm glad today's the day." She paused, caught off guard. "Why?" He gave the faintest smile. "Because Ivy never talks to me." Elara returned to the counter, trying to act normal, but her heart was thudding. He was charming without trying, completely calm, but the kind of calm that made you lean in. For the next half hour, he stayed in his booth, sipping coffee, occasionally looking her way. Right before he left, he approached the counter. "Thanks for the coffee," he said, sliding a $100 bill across the counter. Elara blinked. "Cassian, this is for your time," he said. "And in case you're covering Ivy again next Friday," she swallowed. "I don't usually work Fridays." "Well," he pulled out a business card and slid it toward her. "If you ever want to." The card was black, simple, with only his name and number. Elara stared at it long after he walked out the door. 2 days later, she was walking through the local farmer's market when she heard someone say her name. "Elara." She turned around, and there he was, Cassian, in jeans and a white button-down, sleeves rolled to the elbows, holding a small paper bag of peaches. "You shop here?" she asked, surprised. "I live a few blocks over. You?" "Same, I come on Sundays for the discounted fruit." He grinned. "You have a favorite?" "Peaches, but only if they're overripe." "I'll trade you," he said, handing her the bag. Elara laughed. "You just bought these." "I think I like your smile more than I like peaches." She opened her mouth, closed it again. "You're really smooth, you know that?" "I try." They walked through the market together, talking about nothing and everything. She found out he'd grown up in the city, worked his way up from coding in a garage to building Mercer Enterprises. He asked about her what she did when she wasn't rescuing her friend's barista shifts. "I'm a graphic designer," she said. "Freelance, but work's been slow lately." "Do you have a portfolio?" "I do. Send it to me. I know a few people might be able to help." She hesitated. "You don't have to, I want to." They stopped at a coffee stand and Cassian ordered for both of them without asking what she wanted. "How did you know I like oat milk lattes?" she asked. "You look like an oat milk girl," she laughed, shaking her head. "So now you're profiling people based on milk preferences. I'm right, aren't I?" She sipped, then nodded. "Fine, you got lucky." Over the next few weeks, they started running into each other more often, though Elara had a sneaking suspicion it wasn't always coincidence. Once, she found him waiting outside the café even though it wasn't Friday. "Thought I'd see if you were working," he said. "You could have called." "I could have. But this is more fun." He took her out once, just for coffee, then again for dinner at a quiet rooftop restaurant with string lights and a view of the skyline. "I feel like I shouldn't be here," she said when they were shown to a table with a white linen cloth and a view of the city lights. "Why? I'm wearing $15 shoes." He leaned in, voice low. "You're the best-looking person here." She stared at him, stunned by the way he said it, not like it was a line, but like it was the truth. "I don't understand you," she said finally. "I'm not that complicated. You're a millionaire who hangs out in coffee shops and gives away peaches. And you're a girl who walks around in $15 shoes and still manages to take my breath away." She looked down, heart pounding. "Hey," he said softly. "Look at me." She did. "I like you, Elara." She didn't say anything for a second, then, "I like you too." It was the beginning of something she hadn't expected, but it was real, and it was just getting started. Elara Monroe didn't know what to expect when she stepped into the marble lobby of the glass tower that bore Cassian Mercer's name. She'd spent the past week second guessing her decision to send him her portfolio. The moment she clicked send, her stomach had twisted into knots. But he'd replied within hours, not with vague encouragement, but with a personal invitation to meet at his office. Now, standing on the 32nd floor of Mercer Tower, she regretted not wearing something more polished. Her black slacks were clean but creased from the subway ride, and her blouse was a little too plain. At the front desk, a receptionist with flawless lipstick and an earpiece gave her a once-over before reaching for the phone. "Mr. Mercer is expecting you," she said after a short pause. "Elevator to your right, top floor." Elara stepped into the elevator, heart hammering harder with each floor. When the doors opened, she was greeted not by a secretary, but by Cassian himself, leaning casually against the frame of his glass-walled office, sleeves rolled up, jacket discarded on a nearby chair. The Manhattan skyline stretched behind him like a canvas of steel and clouds. "You made it," he said, pushing off the door frame. "I hope this isn't a mistake," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. He raised an eyebrow. "You're here. That already makes it the opposite of a mistake." She followed him into his office, her eyes scanning the space. It wasn't what she expected. The decor was sleek but understated, books stacked on shelves, a framed photograph of what looked like a mountain range, a sketch pad open on the corner of his desk. "You draw?" she asked, nodding at the pad. "Poorly," he said with a shrug. "But it helps me think. Now I'm definitely intimidated. Don't be. I'm the one who's been looking forward to this." He motioned for her to sit, then pulled her portfolio from his desk drawer. She hadn't expected him to print it. Yet there it was, neatly bound, pages turned and marked with tabs. "I went through the whole thing," he said. "Twice." She blinked. "You didn't have to, I wanted to." He flipped to a page with one of her conceptual branding spreads. "This one, the way you used negative space, it's bold, and that mock-up for the eco-clothing line, dead on." "You've got instinct." She stared at him, unsure how to respond. "I've already sent your work to our head of visual strategy. They're building a new team for the lifestyle division. It's still in pre-launch, but I think you'd be a good fit. You're offering me a job, I'm offering you a meeting with the team, the rest is up to you." She leaned back in her chair, overwhelmed. "I wasn't expecting this." "I know," he said. "But I was." Before she left, he walked her to the elevator himself. Just before the doors closed, he reached out, stopping them with one hand. "I'm glad I met you, Elara." She looked at him, the city reflected in his eyes. "Me too." That afternoon, she walked out of Mercer Tower with a strange buoyancy in her chest, equal parts disbelief, and something dangerously close to hope. The interview with the lifestyle division happened 3 days later. It wasn't just a formality. The creative director grilled her on design theory, brand psychology, and campaign structure. But she held her ground, and by the time she walked out, they were already discussing onboarding schedules. That evening, Cassian called. "I heard you didn't flinch when Amelia asked about cross-platform continuity." "I didn't have time to flinch," Elara said. "She was like a machine. She's the best we've got, and she doesn't give compliments, but she gave you one." Elara paused. "You really didn't have to pull strings for me." "I didn't," he said. "I just opened a door, you walked through it. Still, thank you." There was a quiet beat on the line. "Then come to dinner with me. Tonight, I'll send a car." An hour later, she was staring out the tinted window of a black sedan, her fingers curled around a clutch Ivy had loaned her. The driver pulled up to a townhouse with ivy-covered walls and a wrought iron gate. It wasn't a restaurant. Not even close. Cassian was waiting at the door, dressed in a dark button-up and tailored slacks. He opened the gate himself. "You live here?" she asked as she stepped through. "Sometimes," he said. "It's quieter than the penthouse." Inside, the house was warm and inviting. There were shelves lined with old books, not arranged for aesthetic but clearly well-read. A record player was spinning something slow and jazzy in the background. The air smelled like garlic and rosemary. "You cooked." "I can follow a recipe," he said. "Sometimes." She wandered into the kitchen and stopped short. The long wooden table was set for two, candles already lit. He pulled out a chair for her. "This is unexpected," she said as she sat. "I didn't want to talk to you across a white tablecloth and a waiter." Dinner was delicious rosemary chicken, roasted potatoes, and sautéed greens. They ate with easy conversation, moving between topics like old vinyl, favorite travel destinations, and childhood embarrassments. When he told her he used to play the clarinet just to get out of gym class, she nearly choked on her wine. After the dishes were cleared, they ended up in the living room, seated on the couch with glasses of whiskey in hand. The lights were dim, the record still spinning. "You don't bring people here often, do you?" she asked. "No," he said. "Why me?" Cassian didn't answer right away. He stared at the amber liquid in his glass. "Because when I'm with you, I don't feel like I have to be anything other than exactly who I am." Elara set her glass down. "That's a heavy thing to say." He looked at her then, his expression unguarded. "It's the truth." She searched his face, heart racing. "I don't know what this is yet. I'm not asking you to define it." "Then what are you asking?" He leaned closer, his voice low. "Just don't walk away from it." She didn't. The kiss was slow, deliberate, no fireworks, no chaos, just a gentle certainty that made her forget everything outside that room. When they pulled apart, her hand was still on his chest, his heart thudding against her palm. "I should go," she whispered. "I know." But neither of them moved. Eventually, he walked her downstairs, reluctance written across every step. At the gate, he paused. "Elara," she turned. "This isn't just about attraction for me," she nodded. "I know." He tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "Then you understand why I'm not willing to mess this up." That night, she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, her heart full and her mind racing. She'd stepped into someone else's shift without expectation. Now she was falling for a man who had the world at his feet, and somehow he looked at her like she was the only thing that mattered. And for the first time in a long time, Elara didn't feel like the underdog, she felt seen. And that was more terrifying than anything. 3 weeks after their kiss in the quiet glow of Cassian's townhouse, Elara stood in the mirrored elevator of Mercer Tower, her hands clutching a slim black folder. She wasn't just visiting anymore. She was officially part of the lifestyle division's creative team. Monday through Friday, she worked 2 floors below the top, in a bright open studio filled with vision boards, fabric swatches, and campaign mock-ups. But today wasn't about mood boards or typography. Today, she'd been summoned upstairs without explanation. When the elevator doors opened, the receptionist on Cassian's floor didn't look up. He's waiting in the conference room. Elara walked toward the glass-walled space at the end of the corridor, heels echoing on the polished floor. Cassian stood inside, pinning something to the wall, a series of layout prints. His sleeves were rolled, collar open, his tie discarded on the table. He didn't look up until she stepped inside. "I didn't know we were meeting today," she said. "We weren't," he replied, stepping back from the wall. "But I need your opinion on something." She glanced at the layouts. "These are the new campaign visuals, initial drafts. I'm not showing them to the full team yet. Wanted your take first. You already have a creative director." "I know. But I want yours." She studied the prints, noting the color palette, the placement of text, the composition. "They feel too sterile, too polished. There's no texture, no grit. It's beautiful but forgettable." Cassian watched her as she spoke, his expression unreadable. After a moment, he said, "Exactly what I was thinking. You didn't need me to say it then." "I needed to be sure I wasn't the only one who saw it." She turned toward him. "You're not usually unsure. I am when it matters." There was a pause. "You've been quiet lately," he added, voice lower now. "I've been busy." She looked away. "Trying to prove myself. I know people think I only got this job because of you. They can think what they want. You're here because you're good. I still want to earn it. I know." She met his eyes. "That's why I've kept things professional. I've noticed. You haven't said anything." "I figured I'd let you set the pace." Elara exhaled softly. "It's not that I don't want more." He stepped closer. "Then what is it?" "I've never dated someone who could buy a city block just because he didn't like the view. I've never dated someone who makes me forget I even own buildings." Elara felt the pull between them, familiar now, but no less intense. "I want to take you somewhere," he said. "Tonight. I have a deadline. Push it." "I can't. You've pushed harder things." She hesitated. "Please, Elara, just trust me." She studied his face, saw the challenge in his eyes and the vulnerability beneath it. "Fine," she said. "But I'm not wearing heels. Deal." That evening, a black SUV picked her up outside her apartment. Instead of heading toward Midtown or the Upper East Side, the car veered west toward the river. They stopped at a quiet marina where Cassian waited at the end of a private dock beside a sleek, charcoal-hulled speedboat. "This is your idea of casual?" she asked as she stepped onto the deck. "It's not flashy, just fast." "I thought you didn't like attention." "I don't." "This isn't about attention, it's about escape." The boat cut across the water, the skyline shrinking behind them as wind tangled her hair. After 20 minutes, they pulled into a small cove near an island she didn't recognize. Cassian dropped anchor, then turned to her with a grin. "I packed dinner." He pulled out a cooler and laid out a spread of crusty bread, cheeses, cherry tomatoes, and a bottle of wine. "You did all this?" she asked, surprised. "I had help," he admitted. "But I picked the spot." They ate on a pair of cushions under the open sky, the city lights distant, the stars faint but visible. "This doesn't feel real," she said after a while. "It's real." "Do you do this with every woman you date?" "I don't date," he said, pouring the last of the wine into her glass. "Not like this." She looked at him. "Then what is this?" He leaned back on one elbow, eyes on hers. "It's me, hoping you'll stop keeping one foot out the door." "Cassian, I know," he said. "You don't want to be another story people whisper about in the office. It's more than that." "Then tell me," she hesitated. "It scares me how fast this is." "How much I like being with you." "Me too." "You don't act scared." "I am. I just don't let it stop me." She looked out at the water, the moonlight glinting off the surface. "I've spent most of my life staying in control. Playing it safe. You don't have to do that with me. I don't want to fall for someone who lives in a world where I'll always feel like an outsider." Cassian was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You're the only person who's never treated me like I'm made of money. Because I didn't know at first, and now that you do, I still don't understand why you picked me. Because you don't try to be anything you're not, and because when I'm with you I feel." Unarmored, she turned to him. "That's not a word." "It is now." Elara laughed, and the sound echoed softly across the water. Later, as they sped back toward the city, she stood at the bow, wind in her face, Cassian behind her with one hand on the wheel and the other light on her waist. For the first time in weeks, she didn't feel like she was bracing for disappointment. The next morning, she arrived at the office to find a small package on her desk. Inside was a vintage brass key on a leather cord and a note written in Cassian's unmistakable handwriting. "For when you want to let yourself in instead of waiting for me to open the door." She stared at the key, her chest tightening. He hadn't said the words, but the meaning was clear. She wore the key under her blouse for 2 days before she said anything. On Friday evening, she walked to the top floor instead of taking the elevator. When she knocked on his office door, Cassian looked up from his desk, surprise flickering across his face. "I used the stairs," she said, "because I needed the time to make sure I wasn't doing something stupid. And I'm still not sure, but I'm here." He stood slowly, unsure. She crossed the room and placed the key on the desk between them. "I'm not ready to wear it, but I'm not giving it back." He nodded once. "Okay, and I might still panic. I'll be here when you do." Elara inhaled sharply. "You're serious about this, aren't you?" "I have been since the day you brought me my coffee." She stepped closer, eyes locked on his. "Then don't let me ruin it. You won't." This time, she kissed him first. It wasn't cautious or uncertain, it was a choice. A declaration. When they broke apart, his hand stayed at the back of her neck, grounding her. "You've changed everything," she whispered. "I was waiting for someone too." That night, she didn't go home. And when she woke up tangled in his sheets, sunlight pouring through the windows of his penthouse, the one he never let anyone see, she realized something terrifyingly simple. She didn't feel like an outsider anymore, not in his world. Not in his arms, and not in her own skin. Elara stood at the edge of the ballroom, watching a waiter pass with a tray of champagne flutes that shimmered beneath the crystal chandeliers. The event was Mercer Enterprises' annual benefit gala, a black tie affair held inside the Metropolitan Club, where the ceilings were painted with gold-leafed frescoes and the walls whispered with old money legacy. It was the first time Elara was seeing Cassian's world in full glare, not in quiet corners or candlelit hideaways, but on display, unapologetic and gleaming. She wore a midnight blue gown that was sleek and simple, but the way Cassian had looked at her when she stepped out of the car made her feel as if it had been stitched from starlight. His hand had hovered at her lower back the entire walk through the entrance, steady and certain, like a silent promise. Now, as he was pulled into a conversation with the board of directors near the auction table, Elara lingered near the floral archway, trying to remember how to breathe like someone who belonged. "You're Elara, aren't you?" A tall woman with a platinum bob and a sharp black dress approached, her smile polite but edged. "Cassian's friend." Elara turned. "Yes, I'm Elara. I'm Madeline. I used to work with Cassian in acquisitions. He doesn't usually bring people to these events." "You must be significant." There was no venom in the words, just cool curiosity, like she was assessing a painting up for sale. "I'm part of the creative team now," Elara said evenly. "For the lifestyle division, of course. I've heard about your designs. Innovative, bold. I imagine it helps to have Cassian backing your ideas." Elara met her gaze without blinking. "He doesn't back anything he doesn't believe in." That, apparently, was enough to end the conversation. Madeline gave a nod, her smile tight, and drifted back into the crowd. Cassian reappeared a moment later, slipping his arm around Elara's waist like he'd felt the chill in the air. "Everything all right. Fine. Just a reminder that I still have a lot to prove. You already proved it. They're just adjusting to the fact that you did it without playing their game." She looked up at him. "You really think I'm ready for this?" "I think you're already doing it." The crowd began to shift toward the stage where a host was announcing the start of the live auction. Cassian leaned in, his lips brushing her ear. "Come with me." They slipped out a side exit and into a quiet hallway lined with framed oil paintings. Cassian led her to a private terrace overlooking the city, where the music was a distant echo and the air smelled faintly of lilac from the rooftop garden below. "I needed to get away from the handshakes and the rehearsed laughter," he said, looking out over the skyline. "You're the only real thing in that entire room." She stepped closer. "You're good at pretending. I've had a lifetime of practice, but I'm tired of pretending." He turned to face her, the city lights casting a soft glow across his features. I've built this life around control. Around making sure nothing could surprise me, but you were a surprise I never saw coming. And the best one I've ever had." Elara's breath caught. "Cassian, I need to ask you something, and I want you to hear me out before you say anything." She nodded slowly. "I bought the brownstone on Eldridge Avenue, the one near the park with the red shutters. You said once you always wanted to live on a street where the neighbors actually knew each other's names." Her eyes widened. "You bought a house. I bought a home, for us. If you want it." She stared at him, stunned. "That's not a small thing to ask, I know. I'm not asking you to move in tomorrow. I'm asking if you can see yourself building something with me, something real. Something that isn't about status or money or who knows what at a gala." She stepped back, needing space to think, to breathe. "I didn't expect this, not tonight. I didn't expect you to walk into that cafe and turn my entire life upside down. But here we are." Elara looked out at the skyline, her mind racing. Every instinct told her to protect herself, to keep things slow, cautious. But another voice, the one she hadn't listened to in a long time, was whispering that maybe, just this once, it was okay to leap. "I don't want a life where I'm just someone you protect," she said finally. "I want to stand beside you, not behind you." Cassian stepped forward. "Then stand with me as my equal, as the woman I trust more than anyone." She turned to him. "Cassian, this has happened so fast, I know. But I've never been more certain of anything." Elara reached into her clutch and pulled out the key, the one he'd given her weeks ago. She held it out between them. "I kept it. I carried it, but I wasn't ready." His eyes searched hers. "And now," she placed the key in his hand, curling his fingers around it. "Now I am." The breath he let out was quiet, but it held the weight of everything he'd been carrying. He kissed her there, beneath the stars and the sweep of city light, and it wasn't rushed or uncertain. It was the kind of kiss that felt like arriving somewhere you didn't know you had been searching for your whole life. They returned to the ballroom hand in hand. Heads turned, whispers floated like perfume, but Elara didn't flinch. She didn't shrink. She stood taller. Later that week, they walked through the empty brownstone together. Each room echoed with possibility. Cassian stopped in the kitchen, resting his hand on the marble island. "I thought this could be yours, the heart of the house." "You said once that kitchens should feel like conversations," she smiled. "And you listened. I listened to everything you say." They moved through the rooms, talking about paint colors and window seats and where the bookshelves would go. When they reached the top floor, Cassian opened a door to a small sunroom with floor-to-ceiling windows. "I thought this could be your studio," he said. "Natural light, space to think." "I don't know what to say. Say it's ours." She turned toward him. "It's ours." That weekend, Cassian invited Elara's parents for dinner. She was nervous. Her mother had a sharp eye, and her father rarely trusted men who wore cufflinks, but Cassian won them over by knowing her father's favorite jazz musician and asking her mother for her lasagna recipe. After dinner, as the sun set behind the brownstone and laughter echoed through the halls, Elara realized something that made her chest ache in the best way. She wasn't just in his world anymore. They had made a new one together. 3 months later, the Lifestyle Division launched its debut campaign built around Elara's original concepts. The campaign was bold, raw, and human. It exploded across billboards, digital ads, and storefronts. Elara's name was credited in every major publication. She received emails from design schools asking her to guest lecture, and her inbox filled with freelance offers she never thought she'd see. But the success didn't change her. She still made her own coffee in the morning. She still wore the same sneakers on weekends. She still walked through the farmer's market every Sunday, only now Cassian carried the peaches. And on a warm Friday in late September, as friends and family gathered in the backyard of the brownstone under strings of golden lights, Cassian stood beside Elara in a navy suit, her hand in his, as they exchanged vows they'd written together. No press, no spectacle, just them. "I never thought a cup of coffee could change my life," Elara whispered as she slid the ring onto his finger. Cassian looked at her, his voice quiet and steady. "I never thought someone could make me want more than I already had." But then you walked in. They kissed as the crowd erupted into cheers, and somewhere in the back, Ivy could be heard whisper shouting, You're welcome. Later that night, as the music wound down and the last of the guests trickled into the street, Elara and Cassian stood on the porch of the home they now shared. He pulled her close, his forehead resting against hers. You still think you don't belong in my world? He asked softly. She smiled. We built a new one. And in the hush of the city night, wrapped in each other's arms, they knew one thing was certain: it had started with a favor. But it ended with forever. The first thunderclap rolled in over the Hudson just as Elara pulled the last of the roses from the brownstones' front garden. She stood up, brushing soil off her hands, and looked toward the rapidly darkening sky. The late autumn air was crisp, the wind pulling at the hem of her sweater. As she turned toward the porch, Cassian stepped out of the house, holding out her denim jacket. Sky is about to split open. I wanted to finish before the frost hits, she said, slipping it on. The soil's already hardening. He looked past her at the garden beds. It's starting to look like home. It is home. Cassian's eyes softened. It didn't feel like one until you were in it. They stood there for a moment, the scent of rain rising from the sidewalks, the world holding its breath. Inside, a kettle whistled. Elara moved toward the kitchen, flicking off the burner. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that carried presence rather than absence. Books were stacked along the window seat, the coffee table still cluttered with Cassian's architectural sketches and her graphite thumbnails for the spring campaign. I got a call from the foundation board, Cassian said as he stepped in behind her. They want to offer you a seat. She turned, eyebrows raised. Me, you've designed the visual identity of the entire lifestyle division, restructured their digital presence, and launched a community initiative that just got featured in Forbes. They'd be out of their minds not to. I'm not sure I'm ready to sit on a board. You're more than ready. You just haven't realized it yet. Elara leaned against the counter, watching him pour their tea. Do you ever stop pushing me to be bigger? Cassian handed her the cup. Only when you start pushing yourself harder than I ever could. She sipped, then set it down. I got a message from my old college professor. She wants me to guest teach next semester, design theory and branding psychology. Cassian's eyebrows lifted slightly. Are you going to take it? I think I want to. I used to think sharing what I knew would mean giving away my edge, but now I think it might multiply it. I'll shift my schedule around. I want to sit in on your first lecture. You'll intimidate everyone. I'll sit in the back, he promised. Elara smiled and reached for his hand. How did we get here? We didn't get here, he said, pulling her closer. We built this. That night, the rain came down in silver sheets, washing the city clean. They fell asleep with the windows cracked open, the sound of water and wind wrapping around them like a lullaby. The next few months unfolded like chapters in a novel only they could have written. Cassian began quietly shifting the culture at Mercer Enterprises. He appointed a new head of philanthropic strategy, diverted a portion of profits into grassroots innovation grants, and removed the velvet rope around the boardroom by creating a mentorship program that included junior staff in executive meetings. One afternoon, Elara walked into the office to find a hand-drawn note on her desk. Come to the roof. She climbed the stairs 2 at a time, heart quickening. When she stepped onto the rooftop, she found Cassian standing beside a long easel, hands in his pockets. I had them install it yesterday, he said. She looked at the view. The skyline stretched wide, the sun slanting across the buildings. For you, he added, your own view. You always said you think better with sky overhead. She walked to the easel, running her fingers along its edge. You remember everything I say. Only the important parts. She turned to him, eyes shining. I love you. He stepped forward, brushing his knuckles down her cheek. I love you more than I ever thought I could love anyone. You changed me, Elara. You made me human again. She didn't reply. She didn't need to. Her mouth met his, and the kiss was different from the others they'd shared, not because it was more passionate or more desperate, but because it felt like the answer to every question they'd never had the words for. That winter, they hosted their first holiday dinner in the brownstone. Friends and family filled the rooms, laughter echoing off the walls. Ivy brought homemade cinnamon rolls. Elara's father wore an apron and pretended to be head chef. and Cassian's younger sister arrived from London with a new boyfriend and a bottle of French wine she insisted was better than anything in New York. Near the end of the night, as the fire crackled and quiet music played, Cassian pulled Elara aside into the sunroom. Snow had begun to fall, soft and unhurried. He opened a small box and held it out. Inside was a ring, simple, elegant, a single emerald set in a thin band of platinum. "I didn't want to make a spectacle," he said. "I just wanted to ask you the most important question of my life." Elara looked up at him, breath catching. "Marry me," she nodded, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. "Yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger, then kissed her with the reverence of a man who had found what most people spent lifetimes searching for. They married in the spring under the blooming cherry blossoms at the Brooklyn Botanic Garden. Elara wore a dress she designed herself, the fabric light as air, the back dipped low. Cassian wore a gray suit, his cufflinks etched with their initials. The ceremony was small, intimate, vows whispered under an arch of white blooms. "I promise to always challenge you," Elara said, voice steady. "To never let you lose sight of the man you are when no one's watching." "I promise to protect the space we've built," he replied, "to never let the world we came from undo the one we've created." As they kissed, applause broke like waves behind them. Afterward, they danced under the stars, barefoot on the grass, laughter rising like sparks into the night. They honeymooned in Kyoto, wandering through bamboo forests and ancient temples, staying in a ryokan where the paper walls let in the morning sun like spilled gold. They didn't talk about work or deadlines. They talked about dreams, about maybe starting a family, about writing a book together one day on creativity and risk, on love and building. When they returned to New York, the brownstone was waiting, filled with late spring light, their shared routines, and a sense of permanence that didn't need to be spoken. One morning, Elara walked into the kitchen barefoot, hair still damp from the shower. Cassian was leaning against the counter, coffee in hand, watching her with an unreadable expression. "What?" she asked. He set the mug down. "I used to think love was something that happened in spite of your life. Now I know it's what makes life worth building." She leaned up on her toes and kissed him. "I used to think I had to protect myself from wanting too much. Now I know I was just waiting for someone who wouldn't be afraid of giving it." Years passed, but the rhythm they'd created never faltered. They worked side by side, each pushing the other to grow. Elara's name became synonymous with bold, visionary branding. Cassian redefined what it meant to lead with heart in a world obsessed with power. They never stopped leaving notes for each other, never stopped slow dancing in the kitchen, never stopped choosing one another even when the world demanded their attention elsewhere. And every Sunday, no matter how busy the week had been, they still walked through the farmer's market, hand in hand, always together, always home.